Okay, so in this video, I'm going to talk about how you should actually price your marketing services, right? Now, this is super important because a lot of people get this wrong, and we're not specifically talking about the amount you should charge. We're actually talking about something that is far more important, in my opinion, which is when you reveal the price, when you actually, tell the prospect, this is how much we charge for our services. Now, if you're not familiar with who I am, my name is Ben Lister. I help marketing agencies, agency owners to save thousands and thousands of hours by doing their outreach for them, and that means they can actually work on the business rather than working in the business. The first thing I want to talk about is when you are having your sales call, your demo call, whatever it may be, your appointment, you should always be focusing on actually diagnosing a problem first, right? If the first thing that you are talking about is your service, the first thing you're talking about is, what you can do for them, regardless of whether you're focusing on results or the actual, the details of the service itself, you've kind of lost the sale already. We can't actually talk about the pitch and talk about what we have to offer without knowing there's a problem in the first place to fix, because if there's nothing to fix, then you have nothing to sell, right? Because a person is not going to go and buy a service that they don't really need. You've got to be incredibly good at sales and almost a little bit pushy at that point to actually close a deal, because the person doesn't need it in the first place, so they're not really looking to buy at that point. But once you have that right, you've diagnosed a bit of a problem, you've understood that the prospect, maybe doesn't have as much leads as they want, maybe they didn't sign, as many customers as they wanted last month, and it's been decreasing for a little while now. You have that problem in hand. Now we can actually attach a value to your service. One of the best ways you can do this is obviously through social proof, through storytelling, basically talking about, clients that you work with in the past. If you're unable to do that, you just want to focus on the results of things. Don't talk about the fact you do Facebook ads. Talk about the fact that Facebook ads or your service specifically will get them appointments. It will get them a return on investment, because as soon as you talk about the nitty gritty, the details, you kind of lose people, and it's not really what they're looking for. They're looking for a return on investment of their business, looking for their problem to be solved. They don't really care if it's Facebook ads, Google ads, TikTok ads, whatever it may be, right? All they care about is their actual problem being fixed. If you tie your service to their problem and you say, we've discovered a problem here, we've discussed it in detail, the prospect believes that you know this in quite a lot of detail now, you understand the problem. It's almost like a coincidence that your service is perfectly fitted into the problem that they have. So your service can, magically fix this problem, but because you're only focusing on certain parts of your service and certain parts of their problem, you can easily align the two and tie your service into the problem. What I like to do in terms of the pitch, so once I've actually pitched my product, my service, and I've said, this is what it is, because we haven't gone into crazy fine details, we can then ask, what kind of questions do you have? And a tip there, instead of asking, do you have any questions, ask what questions do you have. That's a slight change in language, but it always you're more likely to get an actual answer out of that. But once you ask this question, what questions do you have? This is when the prospect will start to pull information from you. They see it as more valuable, right? They actually think is important. If you have a pitch that is, 20, 30 minutes long sometimes, and you go into all the fine details, every little bit that you mention, where you say, we do this, we do that the prospect doesn't actually care about, you're almost like taking away from your service. You're not actually adding value at that point. And I believe a lot of prospects would think, I'm buying something here and all these different features that I don't really need. If you spent the last 50% of the time, if you spent 30 minutes doing it and for 15 minutes you talked about stuff that prospect doesn't actually care about, the prospect's thinking maybe they're overpaying here, maybe they're paying for something that they don't actually want. They're only focusing on one point. If you let the prospect lead the dance and they say, they can ask the questions when it comes to after the pitching, they will pull the information that they want. And when they're ready, when they have all the information that they want, there's no more questions to ask because it makes sense to them. They understand the service. Then comes the important question, which is, well, how much does it cost? What is the price? If you ever get a prospect that asks what is the cost before they've asked a couple of questions, before you think that they've got enough information out of you, you always ask, is there any more questions about this service specifically? Because I just want to make sure that you understand this fully, so we're all on the same page, so that we don't have to go back and forth, something like that. And then the prospect usually will go in and say, okay, well, how does this work? How does that work? What about this? And obviously, once they've done that and they've pulled out the information that they want, then you move on to the pricing of things. If you've done your job well and you have demonstrated the service that you have, you've explained it in detail, maybe you've tied some social proof in there with, past clients that you've had in the past, what you'll find is the prospect has almost had like a mini free trial at this point. They understand the product in detail. They've almost imagined themselves using the product, using the service, and getting the kind of results that you're quoting them. And at that point, the emotions are tied with that. They feel those emotions. They feel happy. They feel excited. They're ready. They can imagine exactly what it would be like to use their service. Okay, you've given them a feeling of the product, right? And now you go on to the pricing of things. Whereas if you did it the other way around, For example, a lot of people will charge high ticket services. A lot of people will charge, at least a couple $1,000s per month. If you do that first, if you say to them, we're charging you $2,500 per month, right? The person is almost going to shut off before that. They're not even going to be like allowed to feel those emotions and allow themselves to think, wow, this product works for me. But if you do it the other way around, the prospect doesn't know the price. Maybe they have a lower price in their head. Maybe they think it's $1,500 or something like that. They feel the emotions associated with this. They say, this is really going to work for me. This is going to be great for my business. This is going to solve all my problems. And then you hit them with the price. They are much, much more likely to reach to that price. If you can imagine, if you're buying, whatever it may be, right? If you were buying a car, for example, the car salesman, the price of the car, right? But the car salesman is much more likely to show you cars that are a little bit out of your budget, right? If you have, £10,000 to spend on a car, and the car salesman maybe wants 11 or 12,000 out of you, they are much more likely to show you that car and to get you to do a test drive, to get you to sit into the seat and to really feel the car and to understand it and to appreciate why it's a little bit more. And then you go into pricing of things, and then you say, and it is a little bit out of budget, but this is why it would work. Whereas if you just came up straight away and said, okay, this car is worth 12,000, let's go look at this one, you would shut down and you say, no, I don't have 12,000, I have 10,000, right? And you're not going to be able to feel those emotions. You're not going to be able to stretch to that. And this can be used in anything, right? Whether it's clothing, whether it's when you go out to eat for dinner, whatever it may be. If you actually go into the restaurant for the first time and you see that this is a fancy restaurant, everyone else's food looks great, it smells amazing, it looks really fancy, you're much more likely to go and stretch your budget a little bit to actually get the food that you want and to have that nice enjoyable time. Whereas before you've even stepped into the restaurant, if a person on the door says to you, it's going to be $200, $300 for a meal tonight, you're probably going to be like, okay, let's not even try that, right? You haven't even stepped into the place in the first place. Maybe that's not the best analogy to work with, because obviously restaurants work a little bit different than marketing agencies, but I'm sure you get the point where you've been able to stretch your budget before because you actually see the value that's attached with that. So if you are attaching the value for your service before you've mentioned the price, then it makes it much, much likely that deal's going to close. And another thing as well, if you have your price actually out there on your website, on your social media, people will look at your website, look at your social media, if you outreach to them or if it's an inbound or paid ad, whatever it is, right? Because your price range is a little bit out of budget, what's going to start to happen is someone will receive an email, an offer, and they'll think, wow, this is fantastic. If you attach a price to it straight away, the only thing they're going to see is the price, and they're going to think, $2,500, I don't have that, it's probably not worth it, it's way out of my budget, right? So I'm not even going to entertain this call. So actually the amount of appointments that you're marketing will get drastically impacted if you start throwing your pricing around. So that is why when you reveal your pricing can also affect not just your sales ability and how many appointments you close, but also how many appointments you're actually booking in the first place. So you can almost see that the domino effect here. The later that you reveal the price, the more likely you have of getting a client to a prospect to that final place in the pipeline, which is obviously signing and becoming a client. And one thing that I saw recently that someone did was, which you definitely shouldn't do, this is not me saying that you should do this, is they revealed the price to a prospect. They had a sales call, and I think before they actually got into the follow-up, they had a bit of an exchange on email, and they revealed the price over email, right, before they jumped onto the follow-up call. Obviously, the follow-up call didn't happen because the prospect saw the price and they weren't happy with it, and they were able to handle objections. So I would never, ever reveal a price that isn't in a sales environment. If you don't have them on the phone, on a Zoom call, I would not reveal the price any way, shape or form. This is simply because you don't have the chance to actually handle objections, right? If a person says, it's too much money, then you can go into your objection handling frameworks and your money handling frameworks. But if you're in an email, the person can just not respond to you. You don't have to actually respond to that person. If you're in a social setting, if you're in on a phone call, it's incredibly awkward to ignore that person or to just drop out the call or anything like that. The person is much, much less likely to do that. So yeah, if you're not in a sales environment, do not reveal the price. This almost works as well. If someone is pestering you, if you send out an email and they are repeatedly asking, what's the price? I'm not going to jump on a call without a price. If you reveal the price to that person, okay, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to book a call, okay? If you don't reveal the price to them, some of the time they won't book a call. It's not ideal, but even if you get a prospect on the phone who's asked for the price before they've even known about your service, the chance that they are going to close and the chance that they're going to be a good client that's actually worth having is basically zero. I have never, ever seen it done. I've handled, hundreds of campaigns now. I've sent thousands and thousands of emails and thousands of outreach. I have never, ever seen a prospect who asks for the price before they know anything about the actual service and, how it works, to actually go and close. Because if you are dealing with prospects that only care about one thing, which is the price, you probably don't want to deal with them in the first place. So that, I know that's a bit of a tangent there, but basically, if someone asks you for the price before you've actually even jumped onto the call with them, I probably wouldn't do it. One way that you can get around that, just to give you an idea, is if you have some kind of guarantee, which you probably should be some kind of pay on results. You can always say, because we are pay on results, pricing varies and different things like that, right? So it's just a nice little workaround. And just one more thing that I want to touch on, right, which is probably a bit slightly separate and could probably be its own video in its own right, is when you are handling a money objection and a price objection, one thing that you want to do is you do not want to enter the prospect's frame. Now, this is a pretty famous idea in sales. This is quite popular. If you for one moment agree with the prospect that your price is expensive, or it's a little bit more than it should be, you're never ever going to close that client, right? And this is obviously super important for the pricing structure that you probably should have, and that I would recommend. If you're aiming the price towards the end of the call, right, it's quite often you're going to get a price objection simply because people think it's worth, they expect it a little bit less. So when you do come up with these objections and when you do face them, if a prospect says, that's a little bit more money than I was hoping for, you can acknowledge the fact, that it is not cheap, it is a premium service, right? But the one thing that you do not want to acknowledge is that it is worth more than the service, right? If anything, you should just completely reject the idea completely, and you say, look, I know it's not cheap, it's a lot of money, but for what it's worth, it is cheap. And from the value that you get from the service, we should probably charge a little bit more. And if you just hold your frame, you hold your ground, what's going to happen is the two frames, right? You're over here saying that this product it's a lot of money, but it's probably worth it, and it'd probably charge a little bit more. And then you have the prospect over here who's saying it's not worth that much. It's worth a little bit, but it's not worth that much, right? Someone has to come over. Whether it's you going to the prospect, which means there's no close, or the prospect coming to you, which means you do close. People just don't have, I don't know what it is, but people just don't separate like this. Someone has to come into someone's frame. And this might take a couple of minutes, a couple of back and forth, but eventually you will agree somewhere, some common ground will be found. And if you move an inch over to them, if you say, maybe it's not worth as much as I originally thought, you're slowly going to start to lose the sale and you're not going to get that closing. But if, for example, you say, we should actually charge more, we're raising our prices next week, this is, a limited time offer. If you're not coming on now at this price, then I'm sorry, but we are raising the prices. It's almost ridiculous that you think that this isn't worth the price. Almost, obviously, don't be hostile and don't be a bit confrontational. But when you are actually holding your frame and holding your ground and maintaining that this is the right price and this is almost too cheap, the prospect only has one thing to do when it's just to come over to you. And it's not going to work every single time. Obviously there'll be disagreements, and the prospect, I think, it might be a bit crazy if they think it's completely out of line with the pricing structure. But more times than not, the prospect will slowly come to you. And if you just maintain that and you just basically, hold frame, your conviction as well and how certain you are that this is the right kind of price, the prospect is only going to do one thing, and that means they're going to come to your side and they're going to agree on the pricing of things. By the way, if you are tired of doing your own outreach, you've spent thousands and thousands of hours doing this and you're not really getting anywhere, or you don't like the results that you've had so far, go ahead and click the first link in the description. It's just a video of me trying to show you how my company can actually do outreach for you. You don't have to click it. It's not a major issue at all. You can just enjoy this content and get the value from this. But if you did like the video, I'd appreciate it if you could like the video. Comment anything down below that you would actually want me to cover, because I'm going to be covering a ton of topics over the next few weeks and months. And if you did like the video, then obviously subscribe, because there's going to be more coming. But yeah, appreciate you watching this one all the way to the end. Hope you have a great day. Take care. Bye.